My name is Kayla Reed. I'm the Executive Director of Action St. Louis. We want to thank you all for joining us this Friday afternoon. We hope you are safe, sheltered, and in good spirits. We are on week 3 of working from home, and we're trying to figure out how to work and make sure that we're still educating our folks and making sure that you know your rights in this moment. Things are rapidly changing every single day. They're changing for us. And so we're trying to digest that information and make sure that folks are able to have access to that and ask any questions. So if you have any questions in this hour, please be sure to put them in the chat. I will kind of moderate the call. On the panel today for this presentation, we have Jackie Langham, who is the Director of Advocacy at ArchCity Defenders, Lee Camp, a staff attorney who works on housing justice issues at ArchCity Defenders, and Sara Watson, organizer with Action St. Louis, who is launching our housing justice work. And so, each of us are very passionate about housing justice. And so we thought it was really important to convene this conversation. And we hope that, you get your questions answered and that this information is going to be helpful. So, what I'll say about this moment is that many of us who are renters, I'm a renter, are the first of the month really brought a lot of anxiety, especially with, pending legislation. We're dealing with the federal government's response. We're dealing with the state's response. We're dealing with local responses. There are lots and lots of demands that are being pushed out and lots of changes that are happening on a day-to-day basis. So we really wanted to take a moment to pause to present some of that information and hopefully it's helpful for you. What we also know is that this pandemic, this coronavirus has created a real kind of economic devastation for a lot of folks who are hourly workers, who are not considered emergency workers. A lot of people are moving to work from home. A lot of workers have been furloughed and even laid off and didn't have protections around their employment, such as paid leave. It took a while for unemployment to be tapped in and those rights to be expanded. And so we're watching people really deal with the first month where rent is due and there's not a lot of immediate relief to ensure that people are going to be able to stay safe in their homes. And that anxiety is overwhelming. And so, last week we saw that 3.3 million people filed unemployment claims because they are out of work. And the kind of response, again, it's state by state, it's locality by locality with some kind of federal oversight. And so we wanted to present some of that information, answer any questions, and hopefully just have a really good conversation where you can take that information and disseminate it. We're going to really work quickly after this webinar to take the information that we're providing, make it into infographics that are shareable so that you can send them to folks that you know. And I won't keep talking because there are people who have the information that we all want to know. And so I'm going to pass it to Lee, who's going to start the presentation. And again, if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat. I'll be watching and I'll pass that to Lee because he can't see the chat while he's presenting.
Yeah, thanks, Kayla. Again, my name's Lee Camp. I'm a staff attorney at ArchCity Defenders. Myself, along with Jackie on this call, we work on housing issues almost daily for our client population. And since COVID has kicked in and really started to take its effects in the area, we've received a lot of phone calls from people that just don't know what to do. And we have worked around the clock to try to start to digest this. And I hope that this is more of an introduction and also let you know what some of those substantive legal rights are, what we understand right now about what they are as things are rapidly changing. So if something's unclear or if you have an additional question, this is more of an informational type workshop, but hey, please drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear it, and it will just give us more idea of exactly what people are dealing with and where we need to be focusing attention on as well so that we can answer those questions to the public down the road. Again, it's a Know Your Rights seminar on landlord-tenant law, and it's going to be focused primarily today on things that have somewhat changed since COVID. So where we're going to go today, are first an overview of what hasn't changed if I'm a renter. What is the same on March 1st as it was 2 days ago on April 1st? What has changed? What additional protections do you have right now as a renter in Missouri, a tenant in this area? What specific protections do you have if you live in St. Louis? And then what to do, who you can reach out to, other ways to get engaged and organized and become empowered now that this COVID crisis has hit us and we're all dealing with it in different ways. So what hasn't changed? Most of this information I've kind of gleaned from different things I've seen around the internet and calls that we've had to try to figure out where there may have been some myth about things that were happening. What hasn't changed as of April 1st, generally, you still were under an obligation to pay your rent. That doesn't mean that that's right or wrong. It just means that it was still, if you were under a contract to pay rent, you still had to pay your rent coming up, and that's a continuing obligation the whole time that you're in a lease. But you still have the right to a lot of things like repairs in your home, privacy in your home. You still have a right not to be discriminated against for any reason during this time. Those type things like someone should not be invading your privacy to know who you're associating with inside your home, different things like that. And then you still have a right to stay in your house, probably the most important here, even if you fall behind on rent, until a court order is entered against you for an eviction. And we're going to talk about why it's difficult to get to that court order piece here in a second. So what has changed? So in the city and the county, there are two different eviction moratoriums right now. These moratoriums prevent landlords from obtaining those eviction judgments. So that means that a landlord physically cannot get into a courthouse right now to see an eviction case carried out. If one was filed against you and you had a pending court date that you never made, I would advise you to check with an attorney or check online at the Missouri CaseNet. You can find that on Google to see if your court date has moved or anything like that. But if you are falling behind on rent for the first time and you're worried about that eviction, it's generally difficult right now in the city and the county for a landlord to physically get a new court date and get you into court to start that eviction process. That being said, it doesn't protect a landlord from filing an eviction against you. And we do anticipate that there will be landlords in the community that will move forward with filing evictions against individuals during this time for one reason or another, largely probably related to not being able to pay your rent. That's in place. However, a landlord can file a lawsuit against you all day, but they can never get service on you under different court orders in place in the city and the county. This means that even if a lawsuit's filed, a sheriff shouldn't be bringing papers to your home, serving you with those eviction papers, getting that process started to physically remove you from the home. Oh, also, the sheriffs can't actually physically execute on eviction judgments that weren't executed prior to a couple of court orders that came out about a week and a half ago. And we'll talk about how long those orders run. The one in the county eviction moratorium, it's in place through April 22nd, and the city moratorium is in place through April 19th. Those are important dates because they at least have put some sort of hold on this issue of eviction right now. But probably the most important date for individuals to realize is that the Missouri Supreme Court has halted, for all intents and purposes, every court appearance through May 1st that requires someone physically come into court. What's important for renters right now is that to have your home taken away, it would be a very difficult process to be done without you physically appearing in court and having your chance and your day in court before a judge. That deadline of May 1st, if you'll notice, goes further than the April 22nd and April 19 dates. Likely, the city and the county courts will move their dates out further to reflect that May 1st date. But with the May 1st protection in place right now, it's going to be really difficult for anyone to physically get into the courts to do much of anything at this time, including file an eviction and see it through to physically remove someone from their home. If anyone is watching out of state or in St. Charles, Jefferson County, there are orders like this that have been put in place around the state. It really just depends on where you live. If you have an individual eviction moratorium in your different town, but this May 1st deadline or court order covers the entire state. So the Missouri courts are fairly closed for anyone to get into through May 1st, but it still would be, we would advise you to go and look and try to find an order, see what's going on in your individual town if you're watching this from outside of St. Louis City or St. Louis County. So I wanted to spend some time on individuals that may have Section 8 vouchers or live in public housing in the city or county of St. Louis that receive those vouchers from either the housing authority in the county out on Natural Bridge or in the city on Page. So I'll go through each one. The housing authority in the county is St. Louis County. They are not filing any evictions right now. We have spoken with their leadership there, and they've put public statements out on their website stating the same. They're under no hard guidance right now from the federal government or the state government not to file these evictions, but through our conversations, they've assured us that right now we're not filing any of these type actions. Their offices right now are closed, but you could still schedule time, or the housing authority in the county, you could still schedule a time to physically go to their office and drop off documents and get in touch with your caseworker, schedule a time to do that. One reason that's really important right now for those individuals that are lucky enough to have Section 8 vouchers or live in public housing, if your income is reduced for any reason, this would apply through any different time, but particularly now as incomes are changing and people are having their hours cut or really losing their jobs, you should report your income change immediately. This means that your rent would be reduced in some sort of proportion to what your actual income is. And as incomes drop, your rent will be reduced, and it'll allow you to have some more stability and be able to really afford your home that you're living in right now. In the county, particularly, about a month ago, the wait list opened, and a bunch of people have started to receive new vouchers. It's one of the first times we've seen it in a while, and it's at a crucial time. But if you got one of those new vouchers, if you haven't found housing but still have the voucher, the housing authority is moving with people or working with people to move into new homes, get them inspected. You could still go through that process. Or if you're having difficulty finding housing right now due to, maybe you can't look at a house in the middle of COVID, you can still ask for additional time right now to use that new voucher. And we would highly advise that if you fall into any of these situations, just make sure you're communicating with your caseworker at the housing authority in the county as things move on. In the city, we have an understanding of the same thing, that they're not filing any evictions right now. Their offices are not open, but at the city office, they actually have a Dropbox on Page where you could take different documents like proof that your income has changed or anything like that. Again, we would advise you to immediately report income changes. No matter, whenever that happens, do it. But particularly right now, they should be concerned and ready to respond to those income changes more than ever. And then the housing authority in the city actually has this website that's listed here, and we'll put these slides up on a website for you, and there's a few different links through them. But the city is hosting all of their information about how they're working with property owners, how they're working with tenants, how Section 8 differs from public housing and whatnot. They've put it all in a central place on their website, and we would invite you to go look at that if you do receive some sort of subsidized housing assistance from the housing authority in the city. So there have been a handful of different protections that were recently passed at the federal level that are going to directly impact a lot of tenants. And these are tenants that live in some sort of subsidized housing, whether that's public housing, Section 8, There's housing that has tax credits associated with it. It's a little hard to figure that out sometimes. But if you are living in some sort of housing where you don't pay market rate rent, where your income determines what your rental amount should be, you're likely falling into this protection under a federally subsidized housing program. And what that protection is that since March 13th, for 120 days since March 13th, no one living in that type housing can have an eviction filed against them for non-payment of rent. If you're falling behind and you get caught up on your rent, but you're worried about late fees that may have been stacked against you during that time, no late fees can be collected at all during that time, and you cannot be taken to court solely over those late fees as well. And then when things hopefully normalize in a few months and this 120-day period have passed, if you are behind and your landlord says they're going to evict you or tries to begin that process, they actually then have to give you a 30-day notice of non-payment stating that we're giving you 30 more additional days to get caught up on your rent or to work out some sort of an agreement where you could have that last kind of security to try to take care of the rental issues or prepare if you're planning to move and whatnot anyway. So essentially you have 5 months of protection right now if you fall into this type housing, and it will be into the beginning of the fall before anyone could actually get an eviction filed against you for failing to pay your rent in that type housing. As for the state protections, we don't have any really right now at all. Sara is going to talk here in a moment about different ways you can get involved to urge the state to pass different protections, to put a rent freeze in place, to stop evictions statewide and whatnot, to take these federal things further. But as we said here today, there are no additional protections for tenants that have been granted by our state government. And it looks like it's going to be a little bit of a fight to get some of those things. So lastly, wanted to talk about kind of what to do if you have certain things happening. So as I said earlier, you still have the right to have problems in your home taken care of. I get right now that it may be difficult for individuals because you don't want someone coming into your home, or you don't feel comfortable going to a management office and talking to someone in a time that we should all be social distancing. So what we would encourage is if you want someone to be working on something in your home, you truly feel like it's a threat to your life, your health, your safety, to still ask for it. We would recommend that you make that repair in writing, whether that's an email, you write it down on paper, you send a text message to your landlord, and then keep a copy of that document. Put a date on it, keep a copy of it, even if it's just the email receipt, or you physically take a picture of it with your cell phone of a notice that you're going to deliver. If the issues are happening outside of your home and you've reported them to your landlord and you're asking them to fix them, you have every right to say, I don't want you in my home at this time. If you need to talk to me, ask me to come outside. Try to work out some of those arrangements so that you feel comfortable dealing with this. But the clear thing is you still have the right to have repairs done in your home, particularly repairs that need to be made for major issues that could really affect your ability to live and enjoy your rental home as your personal home. And then the issue of not paying rent. Maybe making a partial payment, not being able to pay any. This is the question we get the most, and it's ultimately the hardest to answer because it's the tenant's decision. We're not here to give advice to anyone that you should or shouldn't be paying your rent over taking care of other expenses that have started to stack up in light of the coronavirus. But we would advise you to do a few things. The first is look at your lease. Some leases have clauses in them for these unprecedented times. Sometimes they're called act of God clauses. Sometimes they're called impossibility clauses. If you see any language like that, you should at least begin talking with your landlord, assuming you have a decent relationship with them, to say, hey, it's going to be impossible. We have this language in the lease. You know, am I excused at all from paying my rent right now? There may be a point, you know, that a lot of these things are taken into the courts and fought over, but it always helps to have that conversation if you do have a decent relationship with your landlord, and then landlords that you really can work with or that you're friendly with. We would encourage you to talk to them right now, and not only talk to them, but tell them why you can't pay. Explain why you fell behind, why you can only make a partial payment. If you try to work out some sort of an agreement to get caught back up, as with everything, we would advise you definitely put this in writing. Again, if it's a series of text messages, that is better than word of mouth in the event that someone was to file a lawsuit against you and you needed to go defend yourself in court. But again, I just want to reiterate, we are not telling anyone specifically what to do here. It's ultimately going to be the tenant's decision on how they want to handle these situations. And we are hopeful that we get additional guidance from the federal government and the state government about how these specific issues of non-payment of rent will be worked out as things drag on. Jackie, I'm going to hand it over to you for a second to touch base on a few of these different resources that people can reach out to.
Thanks, Lee. I have been commenting, adding links as well in the comments as ArchCity Defenders. We just wanted to highlight some resources that are available in the community that we encourage you to check out and take advantage of. First is the St. Louis COVID-19 Advocacy Hub. This is a partnership between Action St. Louis, ArchCity Defenders, and the St. Louis American. It's where we have our calls to action for local leaders, and has, you know, targets, it has policymaker contact information, everything you could possibly want to advocate locally and at the state level regarding some of the issues that we're raising today, among others, for the working poor, the unhoused, those with disabilities or systemic health needs, those are in jail, prison, those who are in courts, or people who have contact with police or ICE. We also have resources available through the We Power COVID-19 website. There's a link in the comments as well to the St. Louis COVID-19 dashboard, stlresponse.org. That is becoming the centralized location for resources available to the community in the St. Louis area. We encourage you to check that out. Another good resource is 211 that is hosted by United Way. You can call or connect to them online. They are going to be able to give you information if there are resources available in the community, particularly financial assistance. One of the big needs that we're going to see in the near future and for the foreseeable future will be rental and mortgage assistance. And hopefully we can make those demands of our leaders and get more of these resources in our community so that we can expand out and make sure that your rights are protected and that you can stay in your homes even if the moratorium is lifted. So call 211. Additionally, actnowmissouri.org is a website where you can see the statewide calls to action and the demands that are being made of the governor and other statewide officials. So those are our resources. We encourage you to check them out. Also in the links or in the chat box, I have a link to the Protect Mo Tenants petition. That's the top of the chats from ArchCity Defenders. Now we are going to move it over to Sara Watkins, who's a tenant organizer with Action St. Louis.
Hello, everyone. Oops. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you all about tenant organizing, why it's important, some ways, some tactics that we can use. And first, I just want to introduce myself a little bit, tell you all a little bit about me and why I started with tenant organizing. I've lived in St. Louis for about 7 years now, and majority of that time I've rented from slumlords who refuse to make maintenance repairs, who are unresponsive. It really took me a long time to understand that it's not something normal. It seems normal because in St. Louis, as we're so segregated, people, I feel like landlords like kind of prey on a certain type of demographic here. So it took me a while to fight back and to find resources. But here I am now, stronger than ever. So let's go ahead and get into it. The next slide is, why is tenant organizing important? First of all, safe, clean, and affordable housing is a human right. It shouldn't matter how old you are, where you live, how much money you make. Everyone deserves to have a clean living environment. Another reason why tenant organizing is important is because renters make up a huge section. We make up a lot of the working class, and we also contribute a lot of money to the housing sector and in the global economy. So that leads me into my next point. That's a lot of power that can be shifted when tenants organize and come together with demands. We can hold targets accountable. And so who are those targets? Of course, landlords would be your target, policymakers locally is the best way to start with what's around you. Developers, your elected and appointed officials, other government members, and of course your base. You want to target your base, which would be other renters in your community, to build a movement. All right, and next slide is, how do we organize tenants? One way is by forming tenant unions. A tenant union can be like neighborhood based. It could be with just like people in your area, in your neighborhood, or if you live in an apartment complex, your tenant union could be everyone that lives there. Another way to organize is by building partnerships and coalitions with people that could help you, like lawyers, media, other housing activists, and tenants coming together as a coalition. Another way is to hold renter assemblies, which is just a way for the community to come together, talk about issues with housing, and come up with strategies to find solutions. A key part to organizing tenants is empowering each other, empowering especially impacted folks to, like I said, come up with an agenda and a strategy and a vision for the way we want our housing to be. And then once you have all that, then you would launch a campaign, which would bring in more supporters. It brings attention to your causes and issues, and it's how you take action. So some ways, once you've got your tenants together, some ways and methods to shift power and hold your targets accountable would be through rent strikes, which it's not as simple as it sounds. It has to be done a certain way, but it is a way to make a stand against your landlord, let them know you don't want to pay the rent. Rent strikes. It's really loud outside. Can you all hear that? So yes, rent strikes. Yeah, so you don't just want to stop paying your rent. You want to come up with demands together, present them to your target, to your landlord, and then you want to stand firm until those demands are met. Petitions are a great way to amplify your mission and your vision. There are a lot of petitions going around right now related to the COVID crisis. You can petition for policy changes. You can petition action, just asking people to act. Writing demand letters, reaching out to media is a great tactic to have media on your side. Writing op-eds, having press releases and press conferences, especially if you're having direct actions and things like that. So I just want to go over real quick a couple housing justice wins that's going on around us. In KC, Kansas City, Missouri, they have a pretty strong tenant movement. They have been able to pass a tenant bill of rights. They also targeted a specific landlord. You may have heard of TEH. In their properties, they have some properties here in St. Louis and KC and other states, but they've done a great job of targeting them. They actually got their mayor to sleep in one of the TEH properties, which I think was pretty cool. They have a hotline that you can call with questions. So yeah, they're killing it out there in KC. Some other wins are rent control. Rent control has been passed in about 5 states. In about 5 states, California, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and DC have all fought for rent control. You know, our rent prices keep going up and our wages aren't. Let's see. So yeah, rent control is a housing win. I was gonna say that St. Louis, our rents are very high compared to other states. So that's something I hope to see in the future. And also a win I would say is the housing justice COVID response. People rallied around the moratoriums for rent and eviction and really demanding action and support from our elected officials. So that was really good to see. So if you or someone you know are experiencing landlord-tenant issues, just a few things I want to tell you, or if you've ever experienced an issue, even if you aren't right now, you are not to blame. You are not alone. We are stronger united, and together we can fight back. But the way to do that is you have to talk to people. You have to talk to your neighbors. If you're going through something, chances are you're not the only one. Okay. And then I have a few resources that Jackie have already shared with us, but ArchCity Defenders does help with some housing justice cases. EHOC, they provide like know your rights trainings. They can also assist with some housing issues. They do like these stings, I guess, where they will go like these discrimination missions. Well, they'll go into different landlords and property managers and see if they'll be treated differently for any reason. Also, Act Now Missouri, which was mentioned earlier, has a lot of resources on their website if you go there. Lots of ways to plug in and stay in touch. And so I just wanted to wrap this up with letting you all know that we are really trying to build a strong tenant movement here in St. Louis. It's really needed, it's really necessary. We need everyone to come together. If you're interested in working with us in the future, here's our information to contact us, shoot us an email or a message, and we can get you on our base list.
Thanks, Sarah. And this is just contact for both of our organizations. Phone number for ArchCity. Action doesn't have a phone number, but you can email us at info@actionstl.org, and we're pretty responsive. So we have a couple questions that I just am going to pose to the entire panel, and folks can chime in. So Amanda asked about the ordinance in Oakland that was recently passed to extend the scope of their moratorium on evictions. Can either of you talk about that and then what that could look like in St. Louis City or County? Then we also have a question around just to reiterate the importance of reading your lease?
I can speak not specifically to Oakland, but to the national movement on these issues. I'll speak first by saying, if you want to see the scope of the protections expanded here, we highly get involved with our organizations, and we are pushing out information constantly about different ways you can influence policy right now. Any eviction moratoriums that are passed at the statewide level that are more expansive than the ones that we have here, protections that literally freeze rents from rising, that stop rent from being collected during this time. Additionally, give protections to the homeowners so that they're not foreclosed on, that the landlord isn't foreclosed on, that the low-income homeowner isn't foreclosed on. If you want to see those things done locally, it's going to take a policy solution. There's no quick fix law or protection that's going to be put in place without a change in policy right now. And so we would highly advise you, again, follow our organizations, sign these petitions, and get involved. We're going to be putting calls out to make sure the governor knows we're there, and that the legislature know we're there, and our local elected officials know that we're here, to let them know that we need these protections now. We're hearing it from multiple people, but we need to organize and make our voices known there. As for reading your lease, I can speak on that for a second. Leases are contracts. They are legal documents. They contain all kinds of different things that maybe you don't really notice when you first sign it. I'm a renter. When I sign a lease, it feels like, even as an attorney, a situation I don't have much power in to change something, but you do, and you can bargain for different things. The reason that I think right now is a moment to revisit your lease is to look for any like additional protections that may be in there under those things like impossibilities or acts of God that would prevent the lease from being enforced. These are rare. I mean, particularly in rental leases, but you may have one in your lease. They're usually used to protect people from things like hurricanes or tornadoes coming through. But right now we're in a different type of problem, and it may very well be that COVID itself gives you a legal defense for why you cannot pay your rent, and that you and your landlord agreed that you would have this protection and this out when you signed your lease. So I would just say now's the time, if any, to get familiar with the terms that are in there.
I wanted to speak quickly to that, and Lee just brought up a really good point. I think it's important to know that this is a fluid process and things are changing as we go. I encourage you to continue to monitor ArchCity Defenders and Action St. Louis's social media. At the end of this, when the moratorium is lifted, we're going to be looking at creative strategies for renters and how to respond to this. So please stay in touch, stay tuned, stay connected with both of us, and we'll make sure that we get the information out to you when we can. With regard to Oakland really does have a great moratorium. All residential evictions are prohibited until May 31st, and that day can be extended by the Oakland City Council. Additionally, landlords are not allowed to increase rent by more than 3.5% and can't charge late fees if a tenant is too sick to pay the rent or is late in paying because they were complying with local emergency measures. Renters can't be fined if they lost income because of the pandemic either. It also has some protections for small businesses with commercial leases if they can't pay their rent because of the pandemic. It's important to look at what other communities are doing. It is possible for us to pass in St. Louis and St. Louis County what's happening in these other jurisdictions if we have the political will to do it, which is why tenant organizing is going to be so important now and in the near future. I just want to make sure that you know that this information will continue to change over the course of time over the next few months. So always, like I said, stay tuned to our social media and our information that we post online. And I know, Kayla, you have something to add.
Yeah, I was going to add, part of the reason that we put those petitions in the chat is because it allows us to get your information on the back end. and it kind of aggregates you for a particular issue so that we can reach out about it. The other piece is that, this moment is very fluid. Missouri is estimated to reach its peak with the COVID virus in mid-May, around May 18th, which already is standing in contradiction to when those eviction moratoriums will be lifted. So there's already kind of an immediate need to have action on the mayor and the county executive to extend the moratorium beyond the date where the state is going to have its peak, because if we're not working until the end of April, we can't pay rent at the beginning of March. And while we feel like that's obvious, sometimes we have to leverage our voices to put pressure on the mayor. So what I will also encourage you to do is to leverage, stay in touch with us and push on these issues. The Board of Aldermen, the legislative body of the city of St. Louis, is currently not meeting, citing the social distancing requirements. And in the same way that we are organizing these webinars and leveraging Zoom to have conversations, they could hold public forums where they are discussing these issues and can legislate through some of these ordinances that are needed in this time. The Board of E&A is still meeting. They have not set up the kind of infrastructure to have public feedback, take in questions, but I do think that we can at all times target the mayor, Lyda Cruson, the president of the Board of Aldermen, Lewis Reed, and Comptroller Darlene Green. They are the executive branch of the city. And the county executive, Sam Page, is also, and there's been more housing related work recently in the county. And so County Councilwoman Lisa Clancy, I think, is an advocate of these moments. And so it's really about kind of power mapping the political landscape in this time, and thinking about the immediate needs. And so Oakland definitely is situated in itself as kind of a North Star where we should be moving toward. And I think that while we are stuck in our homes right now, and need to be here for safety, we can organize from where we are to create the pressure where where our local officials are really thinking about housing and renters specifically. And then the other thing I'll mention is that, the question that I would ask and pose back is, there are a lot of things in the stimulus package that are still being dissected. There are things for organizations, there are things from homeowners, there are things for property owners, there are things for renters. But we also know that there are a lot more protections for homeowners than there were for renters. But there are some clauses in which if your landlord is mortgaging the property that you are renting, there's some relief that they can take that may be relief to you. They just have to do the work to get in to access those resources that were made available through the stimulus package. And so if there is, if you have a landlord who is an older person and not sure what's happening in this moment, it may be worth sending them that information to tell them the option. Sometimes we have to educate those who hold more power than we do. That happens a lot, actually. And so just thinking about the creative ways, the most important thing right now is that folks stay educated on the issues and really be thinking about how can we speak to our leadership. Right now, I think on Facebook, Lyda's having a Facebook Live where people can submit questions. I think it's a really good question to go over there and say, hey, after you get off with us, to go say, hey, why don't we have a rent freeze in our city like Oakland does? This is a Democratic stronghold. We are watching the governor not preempt local ordinances around things like stay at home right now in the ways that they have done with some things like minimum wage in the past. So we can really leverage this moment to make sure that we're protecting communities that are the most susceptible to economic devastation. There's a question about resources. Again, we would take you back to the slide where we would recommend all folks use 211. If you've never used 211, it's a really good resource. They direct you to resources to kind of triage for you and connect you to the best resources. And then the website STO, I can't remember it, but it's in the chat if you just scroll up. It's STO Response COVID, STOresponse.org also has some some links that have different kind of funds where people can apply. If you're an artist, if you're an hourly worker and the restaurant you worked at is closed, a lot of folks are setting up those relief funds that have, you know, they're not state sanctioned, they're kind of personal, individual, group-based funds that are being rolled out, and that's a central hub for it. So I would look through those, because some folks are giving out $1,000 or $500, and if you can apply for that, those are just opportunities where community is showing up for community. Word. Okay, I think we have answered all the questions. ArchCity put a comment in, International Institute might be an option for undocumented folks too. Thank you, Jackie, who typed that, I think. And so with that, you know, I would just open up any last comments from the panel. Lee, Jackie, Sara, do you have anything else that you wanted to share before we close?
I would just add, it's really important for us to stay vigilant right now, pay attention to what our electeds are doing, ask questions, be curious. They're hoping to take advantage, I mean, they're hoping to take advantage of this crisis to get things passed or to restrict rights of people. And now more than ever, we need to make sure that we're holding on to those rights and ensuring that they are protected and that we don't give them up because no one's paying attention to it. There is a question, there's a comment that just came up in the chat. Matt Ampleman, thank you, from Legal Services. It's important to note that most federally subsidized housing programs, regardless of whether they have a mortgage, are also subject to the 120-day eviction moratorium. That is true. So we want to make sure that folks who are paying attention to this and want to know what's going on as far as subsidized housing, you do have a 120-day eviction moratorium. For all others, you know, you need to stay tuned. Like Kayla said, it's a fluid situation and it will be changing over time, and we will try to get you the most updated information that we can as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I would just say too that, you know, we may be working remotely and having this remotely, but we're still working on these issues. So to the community, if you need that legal assistance, if you literally need to just tell your story and have someone listen, we're here for those things right now. We still want you, you know, to be contacting us at our office. I know Action's the same way, and it is going to take people that are comfortable sharing these stories about what they're going through with housing to really elevate this issue to get the attention that it deserves. And so, you know, feel free to reach out. We're still here for you, even though we're not physically where we usually are.
Sara, do you have anything you wanted to add? No? Okay. So again, you know, keep in touch with us, follow us on social media. You can subscribe to our newsletters on our respective websites, and those demand lists, particularly the ones that are placed in the chat from ACT Missouri and the Mo-Tenant group form. Sign those, and that helps plug in. You know, you become the first folks that we are able to reach out to as we move through this. Also, if you are experiencing a particular, you know, situation and there's a story, like, please just, you know, send us a message. We can only tell you what we can and we cannot do. And in this time with the distance, communication is like really key. And so with that, you know, we really want to thank you all for joining us. We know that we put this up 3 days ago. And so the fact that 40 of you are watching right now, we're going to leave this video up so people can go back and watch. I really want to thank Lee and Jackie and Sara, the whole team at ArchCity Defenders and Action St. Louis for putting this together. Thank you, Zoom, for not crashing on us. And we hope that you have a safe and happy weekend indoors as much as you can be. And thanks for joining us. Talk to you soon.